Happy little unreleased games. Unreleased prototype video games are the holy grail when it comes to video game collecting. Hundreds of these rare gems that were never supposed to exist have recently started popping up, and the video game community is all the better for it. It is pretty awesome having a look behind the curtain of various video game publishers and having a look-see at what we really missed out on. Most of the prototypes that have since been leaked online, whether it's in reproduction cart, ROM form, or POG form,
he's back in POG form,
are not that great, but every once in a while you come across something truly spectacular. For example, the NES version of Hard Drivin' was rumored to come out, but screenshots were never released, and ultimately the game was cancelled. When the prototype was leaked, it turned out the conversion was fantastic, especially for the 8-bit NES. Also unreleased on the NES were prototypes for Superman by Sunsoft, which again plays fantastic, especially for being an early build of the game. Appearing out of the blue just recently was a prototype pro wrestling game for the NES that was licensed by the NWA called UWC. It featured large sprites, a decent sized moveset, and the playability is not too bad. It also featured NWA stars such as the 16-time World Heavyweight Champion Ric Flair, and making their first appearance in a video game, The Midnight Express. This was much better than LJN ever did with the WWF license on the NES. One other prototype that has not been dumped, and the only way to play it is if you're lucky enough to get the Galloping Ghost in Chicago, which is the Beavis and Butthead arcade game. Only a few of these were ever made. Today, we are going to take a look at a sequel to the 1984 smash arcade hit Marble Madness that unfortunately never saw the light of day until just recently. The name of the game is Marble Madness 2 Marble Man. Why was this game never released? Why didn't this game use the beloved trackball? So let's roll down the hill like a couple of idiots, because this is the history of Marble Man, Marble Madness 2. Before talking about the canceled Marble Man game, we've got to go back in time to the year 1984, when a little game was unleashed on the public by the name of Marble Madness. This 6-level platform game was developed by Mark Cerny and Bob Flanagan and was released by Atari. For those of you who don't know, you have to guide your tiny little marble through the various traps, obstacles, and other nefarious devices in order to make it to the end of the level before the clock runs out. Mr. Cerny loved miniature golf, especially the course's contours influencing the ball's path, and wanted to implement this into his game. The bosses at Atari had two mandates, with the first one being a unique control system and the second one being 2 players simultaneous action. He had tried implementing a motorized trackball, but due to cost and finicky design, the idea was scrapped and they went with a standard trackball instead. He also added a racing element to the game via the 2-player mode, and soon thereafter went about designing the courses. The graphics and designs were inspired by M.C. Escher and Mr. Cerny's limited art skills. After 10 months of work, their bosses at Atari were pleased with their progress, but they had one final request, which was for the marble to have a smiley face so it would be an identifiable character similar to Pac-Man. They didn't agree with this concept, but if you look closely at the cabinet side art, the marble does have a faint smiley face. As I mentioned, the game was a huge success for Atari, selling over 4,000 arcade cabinets that live on in various home conversions, with the Amiga port being extremely close to the arcade original minus the trackball controls. In 1990, development was started on a sequel to Marble Madness, but this time Mark Cerny was not involved. Instead, the development was led by co-creator Bob Flanagan. He was in charge of the decisions regarding the game's creation as well as the technology that was used. The original game was released over 6 years prior to this, and numerous home conversions were also produced, many of which were extremely successful, with the only problem being lack of trackball support. If there was one criticism of the original arcade game was that it was extremely short with only 6 levels. Now those 6 levels will definitely want to make you tear out your pubes with attitude, but it's also extremely fun. Mr. Flanagan was trying to figure out what had made the game so successful on the home market and came to the conclusion that it was because it reached a younger demographic. He decided to go full hog and design the follow-up more in line with the younger crowd. Batman had rocked its way into theaters the previous year, and superheroes were once again front and center in our pop culture. Mr. Flanagan decided to do what his bosses had asked 6 years prior and added a face and a personality to his little bitty marbles. Your character would have superpowers such as helicopters, invisibility, and big marbles, among others. Since the 2-player aspect worked so well in the first game, the follow-up would allow 3 simultaneous players. Instead of the short but sweet 6 levels found in the original, 17 levels were included this time around, including pinball-like bonus levels. The game was put into playtesting using the standard trackball controls as found in the first game, but the results were not that good. The game consistently scored in the top 3 in the test markets, but it couldn't crack the top spot. It was, however, doing extremely well in the home market with a joystick and a turbo button combo. Atari wrote in an internal Changes to Marble Madness 2 document, "From the focus, we learned that the trackball is the more intuitive control to roll a marble, and that it is the desired control for the high-end player. But the joystick was perceived as an easier control for a beginner to learn the game. Thus, we would like to change the trackball to a joystick and see if we gain a wider audience."
Boo!
The joystick and turbo button combo tested a little bit better than the trackball, but not quite enough for a wide production plan. Mr. Flanagan later noted that switching to the joystick and turbo button control scheme was a mistake. Even though the game that showed up at the arcade used the joystick, hardware support was left on the board for a trackball. At least one trackball version does exist. Focus testers also reacted badly when the marble transformed into a humanoid superhero with a face, which means the higher-ups at Atari didn't know what the heck they were talking about when the original was being developed back in 1984. These were deemed as hokey, stupid, and meaningless according to Atari documents, which caused the removal of the Marble Man gimmick completely for a second prototype. It would have taken too much time to alter the in-game graphics, but they did end up taking him out of the title screen. The wacky, crazy levels were designed by resident Atari legend and St. Louis Cardinal relief pitcher Al Hrabowski lookalike Mike Halley. It didn't matter though, because by the time the game was ready to roll out, public interest had switched over to other genres such as beat-em-ups and fighting games, with Atari's own Guardians of the Hood waiting in the wings. I can't wait to do a video on this one. Over the next 30 years, die-hard collectors and preservation specialists were able to obtain a few complete cabinets, sometimes by assembling parts from multiple sources. The cabinet made a showing at the California Extreme Game Show in the early 2000s, which allowed attendees to try this game out for the first time. Contrary to popular belief, the ROMs have been dumped and preserved for quite some time, but started showing up on public websites such as the Internet Archive, all done anonymously, of course. Custom builds of MAME with support for Marble Madness 2 started making the rounds not long after. Marble Madness 2 was set to be released in 1991 by Atari Games. This simultaneous 3-player marble rolling extravaganza sees you take control of your itty-bitty marble as you make your way through the courses, avoiding the various obstacles while making it to the goal in time. Always aware of the short length of the first game, Marble Madness 2 nearly triples the number of levels included, bringing the total to 17. Along with the traditional levels, 3 bonus pinball levels were included, each one taking place after every 4th level. The 3-player aspect is a lot of fun, with each person controlling a red, blue, or green marble. This game is definitely geared towards the younger market, with the animated faces on the marbles and digitized comical screams when you die. There is also an instruction screen to let you know how to play the game. A flashing trail of lights on certain levels will help guide you through. Although the core gaming mechanic of rolling your marble downhill remains intact, littered throughout the various maps are flags which allows for huge bonuses. There are various power-ups you can get to aid you in your journey. These include knobbies, which helps with the traction of your marble on icy surfaces, helis, which gives you the power of flight to take shortcuts and help you capture flags, the cloak, which makes you invisible, and the crusher, which will give you an oversized marble allowing you to crush your enemies. Speaking of the enemies, they are definitely much more varied this time around, with tomatoes, acid, quicksand, the dreaded black marbles of doom, which are a lot more difficult to avoid this time, huge boxes that will crush you, springs, falling icicles, satellite dishes, frying pans, forks, and anything else your drug-induced flashbacks could possibly imagine. Although looking very similar graphically to the original arcade game, the game actually runs on hardware that was used in the 1990 Batman arcade game by Atari. Compared to the original Marble Madness arcade game, everything appears to run just a little bit smoother, but that could just be my untrained mongoloid eyeballs playing tricks on me. I'm curious how this would play with the trackball, but the controls are pretty good with a joystick, and more specifically, my Xbox One controller, which is what I use for all my retro gaming needs. The 17 levels that you will experience are aerial, sandbox, icebox, astral, high rise, oasis, North Pole, sunburst, wacky. Deep sea. Weird walls. Silly. And the biggest, baddest, longest, most brutal level in the entire history of Marble Madness, King of the Mountain. What makes this level so difficult is that you can only continue once. After that, if you can't complete it, you are SOL and back to the beginning. However, if you are able to complete this monumental task, fireworks go off and you are declared the King of the Mountain. I really enjoyed this game and following its progress since I first learned of it almost 20 years ago. It's amazing how nothing had leaked in all that time, but just imagine what other treasures could still be out there. It's a fun time to be a classic gaming fan with all of the demakes, remakes, and prototypes that are still being released to this day. If you are a fan of the original Marble Madness, you owe it to yourself to track down the ROMs, download a certain custom build of MAME, and give this game a roll. You'll be glad you did. I wanted to give a special shout out to Atari Age user Supergun for providing me with the high resolution photos of the Marble Madness 2 cabinet. Thanks again. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. Thanks everybody for watching.